Okay, I want to read the chapter. I want to read chapter 12. It's entitled "Priests and Sisters," and it's from Maria Simma's book "Get Us Out of Here." She used to see the holy souls in purgatory, and in the book, she's being interviewed. Maria, in your experience over this half century, how many priests did you say believed in your testimony? Oh, I doubt it's more than a fourth of all priests. Those are the ones who believe it deeply, and of course, the modern ones do not believe a word of it. Why do you think the percentage of that is so low? The poor souls have told me that the church has never before in its history been in such a bad shape as it is today. The sin of apostasy is everywhere, and it is the priests who will be held the most responsible for this. Instead of praying and teaching the gospel, they seem to be running about studying psychology, public speaking, accounting, or whatever, learning how to come closer to the public. It is they who should show the public how to come closer to Jesus and Mary through prayer, and not teach themselves how to adjust or to catch up with this secularized society. They have certainly forgotten that if they and their people pray, Jesus will arrange for all the other matters to fall into place. Show me a truly prayerful parish where things do not turn out for the best. You can't. When priests say that your experiences and those of others cannot be true because they do not occur in the Bible, how do you respond to this? God is very capable of permitting things that are not specifically described in the Bible. Just because your name or that mountain out there is not found specifically in the Bible does not mean that He doesn't love you infinitely and find your soul more important than the entire universe, and does not mean that the mountain is not in His plans. Also, many things in the church, such as the Rosary, the Sacred Heart, and the scapula, all came about due to private revelation and are therefore not mentioned in the Bible. Jesus Himself told us about purgatory, and the Bible is full of references concerning the need to pray for the deceased. Anything that teaches against or stops love between people, and this includes people who have died, is not from God. Often people ask why we should go to Mary or why we should go to the saints when we can go first class and go straight to Jesus. Priests and sisters are among them too. Well, how do you respond to this? God put all of us here to help each other through this life. And if others, by their good example, can teach us something about the innumerable ways of getting into heaven with Jesus, why should we not accept their assistance as well? By throwing Mary and the saints out, the other denominations have hardly gained, but rather lost the greatest intercessors for them in front of the throne of God. No one who at the same time does not listen to his fellow man, as well as help that fellow man, is worthy of life. I see going first class with only Jesus as badly disguised pride. It certainly is. Just as a child grows in this life with its brothers and sisters, cousins, uncles, and aunts, so does a Christian grow by studying and getting assistance from the saints whose lives are well documented and from the holy people who are around us today. For those who dare say that they have no need for the Blessed Virgin Mary, I ask, what was it that Jesus Himself said to St. John, to his mother, just moments before his last breath on the cross? Woman, behold your son. Son, behold your mother. Will Jesus even let us go first class if we ignore the mother who bore Him, raised Him, and taught Him? I challenge them to say that they really know Him if they do not listen to those words at the very moment that He was dying for every one of them. Hearing them speak against Mary hurts me terribly. So just imagine what that does to Jesus. But she is just now, in these years, making a very powerful comeback throughout the entire world. She's leading an immense number of people back to her Son through her apparitions that seem to be occurring in every corner of this distressed world. Have the poor souls said anything about modern priests and their role and behavior out in public? Yes, they have. What they like the least is when they leave their habits behind in order to blend into the public. The same has been said about religious sisters. This waters down the necessary respect that the public should show towards them. They have made vows to serve Jesus and not vows to be like everyone else. Are there priests in purgatory, and what in general puts them there the most often? Yes, very many priests are there. Of course, I cannot tell you the exact percentage or the order of frequency of particular sins, but what comes to mind the quickest are disobedience to the Holy Father, lack of love for the Holy Mass, lack of love for prayer and fasting, not reading their breviary, and again, communion in the hand. You probably know better than I do that the subject of communion in the hand is highly controversial. Why is this? The public has not been told the entire story about this and must inform itself well. The law of the Church is that a part of the communion railing must remain for those who wish to receive, kneeling and on the tongue. These were the words of Pope Paul VI. So every church without it is already in disobedience. The poor souls have told me that not one pope to date has personally been for it, but that it was pushed through politically by a group of cardinals and bishops. The older priests and bishops know this, and for the most part have not told the public about it, and therefore it is they who carry the greatest responsibility. All the popes in turn knew full well that communion in the hand was against the reverence of the holiest of holies, and our present pope does not distribute communion into people's hands. Now, this was written a while ago, so I think this was either Pope John Paul II or Benedict. Of course, under these conditions, it is not a sin for the communicant to receive it on the hand, but I beg the people to listen to other popes. Also, it has permitted so much more sacrilege to occur. Please be aware that witches pay a lot of money to hurt Jesus directly with the consecrated hosts that are often secretly removed from the churches. We must stop giving them such easy access to the holiest of holies. This is a very serious matter. Were all the priests to pray to the Holy Spirit and pray the rosary, then none of them would go astray in these matters, as they do so easily and frequently today. If the older bishops and priests were to ask all their parishioners over the age of, say, 40, whether they preferred to receive communion kneeling, they would, with their love for their brothers and sisters, accept and allow that the vast majority would prefer to do so. Nobody can say that 2 generations ago there was less prayer than today, because the very opposite is true. And by going back to more humility and prayer, the young would quickly learn the value of the humble, penitent position in front of the holiest of holies. I've even seen kneeling communicants being skipped over simply because they were kneeling. Then I've also seen children receiving First Communion being told to stand even though their parents and grandparents suffered because of this. All this is Satan's doing, and saddens me terribly. And when people then say that they will be a part of the crowd out of brotherly love, I say no. Because when brotherly love is contrary to our humble reverence toward the holiest of holies and the divine love of God, then this weak permissiveness is not from God. I also remember when the German bishops participated in pushing this past the Pope. It was the Americans who at first said they would not agree with it because it was against the wishes of the Pope. But just look what has happened now, and how many priests did we lose because their conscience could not carry this? Many. On the subject of communion in the hands, something interesting happened a while back in Munich while I was giving a talk there. It came to this subject, and suddenly I noticed that it really got quite a few people excited. 3 people were trying to talk against what I was saying, and they did so virtually all at the same time. I silently asked God for help. As the room became quiet, quite loud and agitated, a good-looking 40-year-old woman in a long black dress off to the side room rose and with great gentleness, but also with even-handed authority, spoke to the room, and in a minute or two had everyone calm again. I was impressed by her knowledge and equally impressed by how she conveyed it with such love. As the talk came to an end, I went to the organizers to ask to speak to this woman and to say thank you for your help. In a way, I thought she was a part of the group of people who had invited me to speak about Purgatory. They, however, thought she was a friend of mine whom I had brought along. We were both wrong. She couldn't be found. And we even went to the front door to ask the people who had stayed at the doors during the entire talk, because the talk had been by invitation only. These told us that no such woman had either entered or left through these doors, and the hall had no other entrances. She was gone. Was she a poor soul? Most likely, yes. And some of us did then pray for her. Some people say that because Jesus distributed the bread into the hands of his disciples at the Last Supper, therefore it's all right for the priest to do the same today. What might you say to this? Not true. Both Catherine Emmerich as well as Teresa Neumann, possibly the 2 greatest German mystics ever, were both permitted to see the Last Supper, and in both cases, Jesus distributed the consecrated bread into the mouths of his apostles. And please, now understand and trust, I am far from the only one saying this. Precisely this subject, among many other related ones, is being discussed today at the highest levels of the church. And I know here too, Jesus will prevail no matter how chaotic things have yet to become. But allow me, what you say, Catherine Emmerich was But allow me, what you say, Catherine Emmerich was shown is again private revelation. Yes, it is, and every time throughout history it has been through private revelation that God has set things straight. And as one of us can confirm, if we research the well-known cases throughout history, the fruits of those were enormous, with a huge number of conversions around them. Just look at Rue de Bac, Lourdes and Fatima, or Teresa Neumann, not to mention the many millions of conversions that have occurred in the last 15 years about the happenings in that undistinguished little village in the middle of the most volatile part of all of Europe. Here, of course, I again mean Medjugorje. Now that I begin thinking of Medjugorje, here is another perspective concerning communion in the hands. Yes, what may that be? And please, Maria, let me hear all the possible angles you know of, because so many good people I know are looking for the correct answer to this. In apparition towns such as Medjugorje, Schio, Garabandal, and the others where Our Lady has chosen to appear, she often does or did so outside. Take Medjugorje merely as one example. There she has often appeared and still does so on one of the other of the two mountains. At those apparitions, you can find anywhere from a small handful of people in the dead of winter all the way to, say, 5,000 on big feast days during the warmer seasons. Without the slightest hesitation, everyone up there, and no matter what the weather will be, will jostle and crunch down into the mud and upon the sharp rocks while getting poked by thorn bushes to kneel while she is with them. That comes very naturally to everyone, and it should. But just 2 or 3 hours earlier, down in the church, while Jesus himself is being received in the holiest of holies, nearly everyone stands proud as soldiers. Is this what Our Lady wants of us? To kneel in front of her and not in front of her divine Son? No, it is not. Please, the good people must listen to and follow their own consciences and not do things merely because others do. I don't take communion in the hands myself. Nope, I never have, and I never will. Yes, and here is another confirmation for you on this matter. It might not be as shocking as the earlier one concerning the woman's blackened hand, and no harm done if we consider it amusing, but it certainly is as persuasive to me as any other story. I personally know a very good and very prayerful woman who also had problems with this, and she simply prayed about it, and then asked Jesus himself to send her a sign quickly to finally clarify matters for her. He did. The very next time she went to receive communion, the priest, as he had until then, put the host into her palm. As soon as he had put it there, it lifted off her palm, sailed away, and disappeared in thin air. This little miracle, too, had several witnesses. Maria, you are convincing. And Mother Teresa also preferred communicants to receive kneeling and on the tongue, and therefore that form is the only one allowed inside her communities. Do you see communion in the hands from the church perspective only a tolerance, but it is not what the church really wants? Now she says, do you see that communion in the hand is, from the church perspective, only a tolerance, but it is not what the church really wants? Then I don't know why they allow it, personally. When priests in purgatory have come to you, who then takes care of the prayers or whatever else is needed for them to be delivered? Priests must then take care of the prayers they require. But if there is anything else, I take it upon myself. How often should priests celebrate Holy Mass? No less than once a day, and the most Masses that are allowed by the law of the church are 2. If the second one is funeral or wedding. But God certainly understands extraordinary conditions that allow priests to celebrate more Masses, such as when another priest is unavailable. This is because celebrating Holy Mass is the very core of their work. It is their greatest duty, and should become their greatest love towards God, to whom they took their vows. Can we presume that sisters too are in purgatory? Yes, and for them it is mostly the lack of humility, lack of modesty, and disobedience that put them there. And what about priests going to hell? Just a short while ago, I had a priest here with me who had recently been very ill. Over several decades, he had been in and out of hospitals, and 3 times came very near to death. During his latest illness, he came very close to death, and there in his agony, he had a vision of priests falling into hell like snowflakes. This shocked him so badly and caused him to cry for weeks. It took a long time for him to recover from this vision alone. May I ask why he had come to visit you? Oh, I knew him briefly many years ago, and after this experience, he came back to me to thank me for what I had told him and had helped him with back then. It was merely a courtesy call that now carried much importance to him. Have concerned relatives or friends of deceased priests come to you to find out whether or not they were saved due to their, how should I say, perhaps different and worrisome behavior? Yes, that happened a while back. A couple from the Alsace part of France came to me because of a priest they had come to know. He had been badly disturbed for quite a while, and one day, in a rage, he threw a Sacred Heart of Jesus statue out of his church, smashing it. Ooh. Soon thereafter, he committed suicide, and these understandably worried people came to me to find out where he had ended up. It turned out that he was saved after all, but in very deep purgatory, not yet to be delivered. Many people say that priests are out of touch with the world. How do you feel about this? That sounds to me like much of the proud propaganda going around today. I would want to tell them that the most learned of men on this earth often need Jesus far more urgently than the simplest of folks. The remark that priests are out of touch is not true if priests pray. Only if they do not will the graces be limited. I think that particular criticism is badly misguided. One can be and should be critical about the lack of prayer, but not about the lack of being in tune with the rest of us. Every one of us shares in the human and thus sinful experiences, and again, no seeking of or listening to a doctorate in psychology, philosophy, or whatever will ever change this. If anything, the modern priests are distant from Jesus and not distant from other men. How many priests and bishops were you permitted to deliver into heaven since Vatican II with your prayers, masses, or sufferings? Well, I cannot tell you exactly, but I am certain it is between 40 and 50. And of those 40 to 50, how many were in purgatory due to some modernizations around the Mass? Almost all of them. And of those, the majority was there because they pushed communion in the hands. If very few priests today believe in your testimony, does it then follow that very few ask for the assistance of the poor souls today? Yes, I'm afraid it does mean that. Very few do. Can you tell me of a case where a priest did get assistance from them? Yes, I can. A priest near Budapest, Hungary, recently wanted to renovate his church and built a small monastery for it. So he first went to his bishop to ask for help. The bishop told him to do what he wanted, but he told the priest that his own coffers would not be helping in the project. So then the good priest prayed and said he would depend on Our Lady to help him through the poor souls. Soon he came here, and I quickly agreed to go with him to his parish, as well as others in that area, to speak on this subject. Within 2 weeks of my returning here from that weekend, he received $100,000 for his church and a monastery. The poor souls quickly responded for him. That's quite a few duck feathers. No, laughter, it wasn't with the duck feathers, but God does very quickly help those who trust in Our Lady and in the help from the poor souls. I am sure you know better than most that many seminaries today stand empty. What causes this, and how could it be remedied? The remedy for this would be if they returned to emphasizing the spirit of prayer, sacrifice, and penance. Then the men would come again in waves. The souls who feel themselves called to serve God in this way know clearly that prayer is their path, and when that is not nurtured, then for what, finally, are there seminaries? Were they to do this, a wave of applicants would result, and then, Just a little bit further down the road, it would no longer be necessary to allow unconsecrated laymen's hands to distribute Holy Communion. This alone within the seminaries would strengthen everyone's active faith and keep Satan at a much greater distance. You put great emphasis in trusting the Virgin Mary to lead people to Jesus. Have you seen any difference between Marian priests and those who have become, as you say, modern and have thereby left her out of the picture? Oh, yes. I can discern a Marian priest quickly. They are far more gentle, humble, penitential, loving, and protective than the others are. In their humility, they become strong, and in their strength, their fruits become far clearer than those priests who operate without her. They also have many fewer problems with celibacy and with Our Lady at their side, come to experience the enormous graces that come with celibacy. It is she who, with our help, steps on Satan's head. This again is not mere symbolism, it is fact. Satan runs from her and from her priests. Marian priests and the Marian army of lay people around them will in the end save humanity, and nothing short of that. And this will happen with the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. So here the world has an openly Marian Pope and a Marian army of priests and laity who will be leading this army through the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. If people wish to join the Holy Father and his Marian army, what is the best way for them to do this? How could people do the most for the triumph of the Immaculate Heart? By starting to pray, by starting to live the message of Medjugorje, and by consecrating themselves and their families to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. I think the Pope she's referring to is John Paul II or Benedict. I can't say I know which one, but I'm pretty sure probably John Paul II, but you might be able to look it up. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. It was a rather long chapter, but some of them are long, but I think they're worth hearing. I myself, like I said, I don't take communion in the hands. I never did. I don't feel worthy to touch Jesus in my hands. It's just that simple. If you really believe it's Jesus, and I know it's Jesus, and maybe one day I'll tell my story about that, but if it's really Jesus, you don't have the right to touch that. You're not a priest. Your hands are not consecrated for this. But that's just my opinion. The church allows it, so it's technically not a sin. But for myself, I only go to Latin Mass anyway, and in Latin Mass, it's not allowed. So we all kneel unless you're ill and infirm, and everyone receives communion. And quite frankly, I see the elderly and some of the infirm actually kneeling. So they make efforts when they can. Okay, hope you enjoyed that, and it's given you some, things to think over. All right, take care. Bye-bye.